Ah, New Orleans summers, they will literally suck the life out of you. Black as Night is an Amazon original, directed by Marriott Lee Go in her feature film debut, written by Sherman Payne, who wrote Charm City Kings as well as episodes of Shameless. This stars Mason Beauchamp, Keith David, Asha Cooper, and Fabrizio Guido. I'm pretty certain I at least somewhat butchered the first names of Miss Cooper and Mr. Guido, and by somewhat, I mean completely. I do apologize for that, but I'm just going to roll with it. And this is set in New Orleans, where we focus on Shauna, played by Miss Cooper, and Pedro, played by Mr. Guido, and they're just two friends, the two best friends in lockstep practically. Pedro wants Shauna to realize just how great she is, and Shauna wants Pedro to achieve his dreams and not just, slum around in New Orleans, because he's got this opportunity to go to a big old school in Texas and everything. And he's kind of, 50-50 on that, because he wants to stay in New Orleans. He just wants to be around his family and his friends, but also he's very out and very proud and is not sure this change of scenery could exactly work that well for him. So it's just all about teen angst and everything. These two kids growing up, and we get to see how their summer plays out and everything. And ha ha ha, it's from Blumhouse TV, because of course it fucking is. So obviously there's going to be some horror stuff about it. And if you've seen the movie, you obviously just want to know my thoughts. So basically I'm going to summarize it by saying this. Without getting into too many spoilers, it's like Vampires versus the Bronx, just with better writing. Sherman Payne actually does come up with some good, witty stuff here. And I won't say that the movie's great, but I will say as far as being from Blumhouse TV, which is very hit and miss. I mean, Blumhouse in general is hit and miss. You're either going to get The Invisible Man, or you're going to get Fantasy Island. And thank fuck this isn't Fantasy Island, because nobody wanted to see Fantasy Island. And Lucy Liu's character is really goddamn weird there, and I don't understand how her career survived that and Truth or Dare, but let's move on from that. So what's this about? Well, it's about 90 minutes, and Shauna and Pedro start to notice that people are acting weird. There's obviously the slum parts of New Orleans, because this is a number of years after the Hurricane Katrina disaster, where, yeah, there were some repairs, but there were still some areas, apparently. I've never been in New Orleans, but there are apparently some areas that were badly affected and never repaired and stuff like that, and they just uses the opportunity to get people out of those areas so they can build them up at the high rises and everything. Well, there are these slummy parts where people are starting to act a little bit weirder than normal. They're either users, abusers, and they're being preyed upon by an unseen force. And Shauna figures out what this force is, and then through a series of events decides to exact revenge on this force and basically try to free the city from this, pure evil. And if you read the description, you obviously know. But for those that didn't, I'm just going to say that the movie is pretty basic as far as a concept, but the writing is kind of what saves it. The acting isn't all that bad. It is pretty standard. Like, you have like Pedro, who's very out and very proud and everything, and at times almost over the top. You have Shauna, who's the heroine of this, ironically, given the subject matter of some of this, and she likes this boy named Chris, played by Mason Beauchamp. And then there's Keith David, and you wouldn't even need to see Keith David in this movie. You just need to hear his voice, because it's very distinctive. Whether he's doing narrations, whatever he's doing, Keith David's fucking awesome. And there's a lot of the undertones about people being downtrodden and everything and targeted just because they're poor and they're trying to make things work. But if they keep getting beat down whenever they try to take a step up, and they keep getting knocked back down, eventually they're just going to give up. And there's some good stuff about that. Shauna does have a mother that is using, and she's trying to get her dad maybe to bring the mother back and everything, because they're in separate homes. Because, well, I mean, sometimes you can only take so much. You have to get where if somebody doesn't get clean, you have to get away from them. You have to raise the kids, and that's what it does. The dad has a very nice house, raises the kids right. Pedro takes care of his mother, I believe his grandmother, and does some good stuff as well. And there's other people in here, but primarily it focuses on those three characters: Chris, Shauna, and Pedro. And then there are a few others that get brought in, like one that knows about this mysterious force that's going on, and she's here and, studying up and like, well, this is why this happened. This is why this happened. And sure, okay, it's a little bit silly. Okay, it's a lot silly given the concept. But overall, the writing is what saves this movie. It's not necessarily a mystery what the whole thing is, but I'm keeping it as obtuse as possible. But suffice to say, once it gets into the special effects, and the gore isn't that bad. The special effects are kind of silly because they only had a minuscule budget for this. But as far as the story and everything, and as far as how they handle the characters and some witty writing, I think that puts it just a little bit above what I expected, because Blumhouse TV had a couple movies last year. One that was okay, and then one that wasn't that great. And Vampires versus the Bronx I kind of shit on because it had a bit of a bigger budget and just kind of failed. The comedy was a real misfire. At times, the comedy sort of works here, and people are kind of fish out of water trying to handle this situation when they didn't expect it. And even Shauna's like, well, what do I do? What do I do? Oh, I have to get revenge for what happened, to people I love. I'm going to bring these people along, and something bad could end up happening. And then we get a little bit of a layer peeled back, which there really aren't too many layers of this story, because if you couldn't have figured out where this goddamn thing was going from the beginning, you've never seen a horror movie. So anyway, I'm going to get into spoilers right now. So yeah, spoilers, but watch it on Amazon if you got Amazon Prime. It's certainly not a bad movie, but let's get into spoilers. Spoilers. Okay, so I said vampires versus the Bronx. That probably gave it away. Yeah, it's about vampires. Keith David is the head of this whole vampire thing. Shauna's mother ends up is a user. These homeless vampires are attacking her. There is this one funny line. In the beginning, she says, the same summer I got breasts, that's the same summer I fought vampires. I did like the artsy credit scene. That was actually pretty goddamn good. Shauna basically wants everything to be okay. She wants her mother back at home. Her dad raises them well, but the brother did say, you look like Wesley Snipes with dreads, so, naturally, or with braids, so naturally she's got a complex. I should probably retro-review Blade now that I think about it. But, yeah, she's, having some issues, but she has a really good rapport with Pedro. She likes that guy, Chris. Then she gets attacked after leaving a party and everything, but doesn't get totally drained of her blood and poison and everything, so even though she got bit, she got saved just before that by somebody, who the fuck knows who it was, and that was pretty much it. She gets saved by some SUV. Then what happens is she's all afraid of sunlight, and then sunlight gets on her, she realizes she's fine. She then tells Pedro, I got attacked by a group of homeless vampires. They determine that, well, what's going on here is they're using this mansion that used to be owned by a slave, or by a slave owner, rather. They had a whole bunch of, horrible shit happen. He built tunnels down there so he could get to people, and he could do all this stuff. Really evil shit. And they then talked about Hurricane Katrina, how the old house was taken down, was blown down and stuff like that, and just completely demolished. And the dad has a heart-to-heart with his daughter. And then there's a vampire book club thing in an old church. The church just lets them use it because they're like, yeah, we don't care if you guys are sinners, whatever the fuck. And she tries to learn the ways of the vampires. She has an awkward chat with Chris. And then they figure out that certain things kill people, or kill vampires. Silver kills them, I guess. They're werewolves, apparently. They then interrogate a vampire that's in this, enclave, just, right along the path that they go to for, that area where all the users are and everything, the downtrodden. And there's a guy named LaFrac that's the leader. And, well, then they figure out, let's stake this vampire because he's going to tell people. And they stake him and nothing happens. And then eventually he just screams and then powderizes. So that's what happens. They scream and powderize. And we find out about the slave owner in the house and all that. Keith David was giving speeches outside, this area of, for the derelicts and the downtrodden. And he was trying to bring people in. And you would see human beings go in and out, in and out. And they were being feasted upon, but not turned into vampires. But the young girls were being used as ways to satiate the people there. And then there was the Pedro, Chris, this, Shauna and this other girl whose name is escaping because that's how distinct her character was. They get everything together. Shauna and this girl go in, and Pedro and Chris basically get garlic in the vents. Garlic in the vents. And that's pretty much it. They basically get destroyed. The vampires are coughing. So they're shake the garlic, and I'm just trying to get through this stuff. And, well, that's pretty much it. They basically end up killing, or that LaFrac guy gets killed. He didn't know who the mother was. And then it turns out that Keith David was the leader of the whole thing, which he's like an 800-some-odd-year-old vampire who was a slave. And then, well, actually, no, he was a slave that was turning his... It was a really complicated, weird thing. But he ended up being somebody that was turned, and he killed his slave owner and became this evil son of a bitch that was just trying to create an army to take down, the good, or take down the bad people in New Orleans by basically just turning everybody that was a drug addict and a homeless person into a vampire. Okay. So they were caught flat-footed, the kids were, and they were basically getting beat down. And then suddenly, there was this cab driver earlier that turned out to be this Trude, and not Baba Trude. And he basically kills the vampires. He's 800 years old, and he can survive in the sunlight because apparently you can just build up a resistance to it somehow. And then he's got, another guy that's with him, and he's got other people, and then they go off and kill some vampires and tell Shauna to stay because Shauna's like this princess that they knew from this story and whatever, and they just start chucking stuff. This is where it starts to get messy. And that was pretty much about it. They basically escape from the house when, they throw garlic on this guardlick, if you will. And they decide to go into the tunnels and then eventually confront Keith David. And Keith David sends his minions. Pedro ends up getting killed because, of course, he does, because he's about 90 fucking pounds soaking wet on a good day. And then Shauna ends up killing Keith David pretty easily. I don't know how the fuck this guy survived. And then that was it. That was it, basically. They buried Pedro, and they were going to be all happy together and stuff like that. And then knock, knock, knock. Oh, it's not Shauna dating, or it's not Shauna's date, Chris. No, it's Pedro. And he's like, hey, mommy. And, the Mexican thing. And that's it. That's where the movie ends. That's pretty much it. It wasn't dull. I will give it that. It wasn't great, but I will also say that as far as what it was, I will give it a C. It had sharp writing. That was about, at times, and then just got messy towards the end. But it was breezy. It was fun. It wasn't particularly scary. It wasn't particularly great, but it was breezy. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.